2021 turned out to be a relatively quiet year for video games, with the current global situation causing a bunch of eagerly anticipated games to slip into 2022. Well, now that we're in 2022, the world is opening back up a bit, and those game development backlogs are finally shifting. So prepare to retreat back indoors, shut your curtains and ignore your friends again, this time to play hundreds of hours of brilliant video games. Here are the 10 biggest new games we can't wait to play in 2022.
Kev, you got eyes on the buyer?
Yep. Here he comes.
And I got the dealer. Nino, they're heading your way. They're here.
You should have eyes on the merchandise.
I sure do.
When long-running series get increasingly convoluted and ridiculous, they eventually get rebooted to take them back to the roots that made them popular in the first place. Considering that the recent Saints Row games included aliens, hell, superpowers, and virtual reality simulations, it's a wonder this didn't happen 5 years ago. Still, it's happening now, and 2022 will receive a brand new Saints Row game simply titled Saints Row, that aims to take the franchise back to its gang warfare roots, with you playing as the boss, starting a new gang from scratch, earning respect, and taking turf from the city's other organised crime families. I run more of a disorganised crime family, myself.
Next step is to find people that can shoot guns.
The aim this time is to create a more even balance between wackiness and seriousness, more in keeping with the series' original tone, but there are still plenty of opportunities for mayhem in the game's wide-open sandbox. Plus, the retention of drop-in co-op multiplayer should help keep things suitably chaotic when the game comes out August 23rd on pretty much everything, including previous-gen consoles, PS4 and Xbox One.
It's been 15 years since the fall. The city is a corpse, and we are the worms. We burrow in it, fighting for every useful piece of land to preserve ourselves from the terrors of the night and the horrors of the day.
Set in a brand new city that looks frankly absolutely massive, open world zombie romp Dying Light 2 switches up several things in comparison to the ambitious but scrappy original from 7 years ago. For a start, the contrast between day and night will be even greater, with a much bigger emphasis on fighting other humans during the day. Feels a bit like we've gone from desperate survivor to straight up mass murderer, but hey ho. Most intriguing, your route through the game's branching storyline depends on your interactions with several factions that inhabit the city. These factions are the usual suspects, comprising the honourable but under-resourced survivors, the militaristic peacekeepers intent on restoring order, and the renegades who see the dissolution of society as the perfect excuse to dust off their studded leather codpiece and live out those Mad Max fantasies.
Make him talk.
It does make you wonder what those guys were doing before the apocalypse. Probably something in finance.
We have you on scanners.
It's been ages since we've had an original property from Bethesda Game Studios, because for the past 15 years, Todd Howard & co. have been feeding us nothing but a steady diet of Elder Scrolls and Fallout games. Now though, we have a fresh Bethesda property on the horizon in the shape of Starfield.
They say, the wonder is, not that the field of stars is so vast, but that we have measured it.
Starfield is the open-world space exploration RPG Bethesda revealed at 2021's E3 Xbox Games Showcase, which is apparently coming out this year, which I will believe when I'm holding a copy of Starfield in my hand. But still, this year! Starfield is another one we don't know excessively much about at this point, since the Starfield trailer shown off in that showcase was heavy in atmosphere, but light on actual detail of what kind of an experience Starfield will be. Bethesda's most recent video on the game came out a month ago, and in true Bethesda fashion, was mostly footage of Elder Scrolls and Fallout games. Still, with Bethesda's pedigree and the concept of Fallout/Skyrim in space, I think we can still justify being excited for this one. Fingers crossed we do see it this year.
To discover what's out there.
The shattering ensued, a war that wrought only darkness. The Elden Ring was broken. But by whom? And why?
Famously revealed as a dream collaboration between Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin and Dark Souls developer From Software, it's since been revealed that Martin actually just did a bit of early world building on Elden Ring years ago and has barely been involved since. That said, just before Christmas, George R.R. penned a blog post saying he thought the game looked incredible, and we're inclined to agree. Elden Ring combines the open world freedom of Zelda Breath of the Wild with the punishing, exacting combat of the Dark Souls games. Should have called it Death of the Wild. There are a few concessions to casual players, not least the ability to instantly fast travel around the world rather than having to endure a painful commute through a monster-infested sewer, but sooner or later, you're still going to have to prove yourself against a brutally challenging boss. Oh, that's the stuff. Can't wait.
You see things others can't. Hear threats others don't.
First announced at E3 2019 in an impossibly charming presentation by the game's creative director Ikumi Nakamura, Ghostwire Tokyo is an action-adventure horror game from Tango Gameworks, the studio behind the excellent Evil Within series, headed up by former Resident Evil mastermind Shinji Mikami.
It's up to you to save Tokyo.
In the game, 99% of Tokyo's residents have mysteriously vanished and otherworldly spirits have invaded the city. You play as a character with supernatural powers, trying to stop them in a first-person game that is more action-oriented than Tango's previous survival horror games, with a combat system described as karate meets magic by the game's combat director. Which, I mean, finally. Ghostwire Tokyo is due out in spring 2022 and is the last PS5 exclusive hangover from the period prior to Xbox buying Bethesda, the publisher of Ghostwire Tokyo. So it'll be a console exclusive to PS5 for at least a year before heading to Xbox Series X, but will also be available on PC for those who haven't yet been able to snag Sony's new console.
Developed by Rocksteady, the team behind the Arkham series, Suicide Squad, which arrives at some point this year, sees the studio switching teams and siding with the supervillains. The game has you either in solo or co-op control of multiple members of the Suicide Squad from the comics, including Harley Quinn, Deadshot, King Shark, and Captain Boomerang, whose superpower appears to be demoralizing the enemy via bad language.
Come on then, you prick!
He can also throw boomerangs, but that sounds far less useful. Switching from gloomy Gotham, the action takes place in Superman's home city of Metropolis, albeit one under attack from the alien Brainiac, who has managed to mind control some of DC Comics' most beloved heroes, and also the Flash.
Really? Why don't you just mail me the bullet?
From the trailers we've seen, Suicide Squad is looking like being a genuinely funny action shooter. We're looking forward to the various members of the squad bickering and complaining as they head into Metropolis on their primary mission: kill the Justice League dead. Though I thought the movie Justice League did a pretty good job of that already.
So, figure out who we're killing yet? Oh, fuck!
Did you ever think of pimp rock a microphone like?
That's your cue, mate.
Sleep tight.
On the other side of the Bethesda exclusivity coin, we have Redfall, coming to Xbox Series consoles and PC later this year. From Arcane Austin, the studio behind 2017's underrated Prey, Redfall is a 4-player co-op shooter that sees you and your friends form a band of vampire hunters trying to protect the town from undead bloodsuckers in the wake of a science experiment gone wrong. With an open world to explore and 4 playable characters to choose from, each with unique combat styles and abilities, Redfall has the potential to pick up the Left 4 Dead co-op shooter crown that was recently fumbled by the underwhelming Back 4 Blood. Also, as an Arcane game, there's a good chance Redfall will have an engaging story and characters to keep you interested when you're not doming Draculas. Redfall is due out this summer exclusively on Xbox Series S and X and PC, and good news, it'll be on Game Pass day one, so there should be no shortage of other people to play it with.
Do you think things will ever go back to normal?
Would you want to go back to normal?
Not if I still have to pay my student loans.
While development A-Team Rocksteady busies itself with the baddies, WB Games Montreal, the B team behind spin-off game Batman Arkham Origins, is preparing to launch Gotham Knights, which will be a lot more familiar to people who spent 3 or 4 games in Batman's rubber boots. The game introduces the popular Court of Owls storyline from the Batman comic books about an Illuminati-style secret society that is controlling the city. The only problem is, spoiler alert, Batman was seemingly killed off at the end of Arkham Knight, which looks a lot like Rocksteady taking their ball home with them. Or more accurately, taking their bat home.
If you're watching this, I'm dead.
So Gotham Knights tells its own allegedly separate story. Batman's still dead, but this is apparently unconnected to the Arkham games, even though characters like Mr. Freeze look pretty much the same as they did before.
Get away from my storm engine!
Instead of Bruce Wayne, we have a quartet of sidekicks to play as instead, either in solo or 2-player co-op. Nightwing, Batgirl, Robin and Red Hood are the titular Gotham Knights, and unlike the more shooting-focused Suicide Squad, they'll be dispatching enemies with good old-fashioned fists and feet. And while the combat looks familiar, the little numbers that appear over the enemies' heads suggest that Gotham Knights is going to have a more RPG focus and more strictly level-based combat than the Arkham games did. We'll find out if that puts a crimp in our capes when the game launches at some as yet unannounced point this year.
Despite it coming out this year, we still don't know a great deal about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, apart from the obvious fact that it is the sequel to one of the best video games ever made. E3 2021 gave us a glimpse of some gameplay which looked very similar to that of Breath of the Wild, but then that's no bad thing because, as I mentioned previously, it's one of the best video games ever made. One notable thing about the gameplay though was the quantity of gliding and free-falling, which chimes with Zelda series producer Aoji Aonuma's announcement that the setting for the game has been expanded to include the skies above Hyrule. So we expect a somewhat loftier adventure this time around. No more details just yet, but expect to see more Breath of the Wild 2 in Nintendo Direct presentations this year before a Switch release sometime in the winter.
Since it arrived in 2015, Rainbow Six Siege has quietly become one of the most popular online shooters, but the promised single-player and co-op campaign mode never materialised. What we have now instead is Rainbow Six Extraction, or as we like to call it, Left 6 Dead. Doesn't really work, but just go with it, okay? Rainbow Six Extraction pits a team of 3 Rainbow Six operatives against an outbreak of weird, hostile alien creatures called Archeans. Where this differs from most co-op survival shooters is that there's a heavy emphasis on things like stealth and strategy, 2 things that tend to immediately go out the window when we start panicking. Still, if you have no desire to go online and get unceremoniously owned in competitive multiplayer by the increasingly hardcore Rainbow Six Siege player base, Extraction will let you run around with that big sledgehammer with a couple of mates instead. Extraction comes out really soon, like January 20th soon, so if you fancy a change from a global crisis you can't shoot directly in the face with a silenced pistol, this might be the game for you. There you have it, the 10 games we're looking forward to playing in 2022, but are there any big hitters we've missed? Let us know what you're looking forward to playing in the comments, and please do make sure you're subscribed to Outside Xbox for videos about all sorts of exciting new games in 2022. Thanks for watching!